Hey everyone. So I firstly need to mention Paul Inglis, who should be my partner in crime up on this floor right now, but he's busy on something else with lightsabers in it, so unfortunately he can't be here. So I'm talking about the future vision of LA as seen through Blade Runner 2049. I'm going to talk about how we help the team with the world building, the vision, the design, the conversations that we had with the directors and the creative teams. Just take you through our process. How we normally get involved in that process on a film, and then how it was slightly different for this particular film. And it really was, there was a lot of expectation on this project, really from our own internal stresses and pressures. When you think about the original Blade Runner, for me as a fan, that's a massive movie. It's had a huge impact on me in terms of, visual storytelling, world building, just that whole notion. So to be a part of this at the very beginning was somewhat daunting, and we wanted to help the creative team make something that was true to the original, but we wanted to make it relevant to today's audience, and that was the really tricky part to all of this. I should really mention who our clients were in this process. So we have Denis Villeneuve, who's created some amazing films like Arrival and Sicario, and was just so collaborative, so generous with his process, and I'll get into some of that later on. But he was just a wonderful person to work with. And of course, you talk about daunting. Mr. Roger Deakins, who's an amazing cinematographer, won the award, and it set the bar for us. We knew what we were getting into, and it's a team like this that we're working alongside. We didn't have enough conversations with Roger Deakins about the work. You kind of want to have as many client meetings as possible when people like this are in the room. And then Dennis Gassner, who's just this incredible production designer. He was working with Paul Inglis and briefing all the other teams that are involved in building out the physical sets that are involved in making a movie like this. And the interesting parts of all of this is, whilst the visual effects teams were doing an incredible job, actually 85% of the movie was created for real. We went out to Hungary, we built these sets, we built these worlds, we tried to make as much of it for real as possible to immerse the actors in those environments. And just that level of craft was it had so much ambition, so much scale and scope, and we enjoyed every moment of it. So to take you through the creative brief, the beginnings of the conversations going on, that really sums up one of the key elements for me in working on this film, this notion of brutality. There's kind of three pillars in terms of our creative brief. Brutality was one of the, absolutely at the top of it. And you can see it throughout the film. It's in the environments, it's this place that people are living in. It's just unforgiving. That had to come through so much. It needed to feel like a struggle. It had this technology, the design of technology wasn't always necessary. I think they'd found themselves in a place of is this really serving us? Is this really the best it can be? And this all comes from the point for the director. What is the point? What are they saying? And it all kind of feeds back from that when we're talking about this world building process. So we always have to have that in our minds when we're working on these things. It's brutal in all senses of the word. It's where society got to. I think the director is really making a comment on where we are now. If this is where we are now, this is where we're going. Is this really where we want to be? And you can see it in the performances. The brutality of it all just breathed through the whole piece. Scale, obviously, is a massive one. It didn't come through so much in our work, but in a lot of the other parts of the project, it definitely came through. Just this looming scale. The original movie didn't have the budgets that this movie did, So we had the opportunity to really be expansive with the environments that we're creating. And equally with the interiors, they're just generous. And it had to speak of that brutality, and you needed that scale to really aid the storytelling. And it goes, it breathes throughout, and especially in the soundscapes, the sound design, you just get that sense of immersion that brings you into the world building. And at every single point, it's kind of fine-tuning to that idea. And then finally, power. There's power dynamics going on here. It's ironic that the most human character in the movie is a replicant. Everyone else is just so hard-edged and cutting. This corporate power, this corporate structure, which we all relate to now, this sense of this is where we are now, where is it all heading? Will it finally transpose to big corporations opening off-world luxury and privilege, and we're all kind of left behind with the scraps. And just coming through in some of these performances, that sense of power played such a contrast and really conveyed what it is to be a human through the eyes of a replicant, funnily enough. So that's all very grand and big and kind of gives you a sense of the scale, the brief, where we were coming in from, really our notions of the beauty of Blade Runner and where the director wanted to take it. We're just there to support him in that world building. And this is really the work. It's technology, technical displays. What does technology say about these three core values? How are we using holograms, computer displays, other optical displays? What statement is that making for the director? How is it aiding the narrative? How is it aiding the storytelling? And all of those other visual aspects that make up the film. So we work in this very weird little specialism called fictional user interface or fantasy user interface. It's definitely niche. So we built this out of really a desire at Territory, this fascination with the fusion of story, technology, and design, and it's this crossover of skill sets at our company that allows us to play in these areas with filmmakers, and we enjoy it, we celebrate it, and we celebrate the cross skill that we have in the studio. We're not this, well, we are a little bit this. We are geeky, we are passionate, we do love what we do. We are not coders, we are not visual effects artists, but we are. We're a mixture of all these things. We're motion designers, we do love tech and code, and it's really just this grey area that we sit in terms of our skill set that allows us to work on these projects. But it does go back to world building. And ultimately, that's what we're there to imagine possible futures, and in imagining those possible futures, making a comment and a statement on where we are now. So I'm better explaining what we do by just showing it, to be honest. So to walk you through the process, I'm going to jump around between a couple of different films because some of the films that we've worked on better explain some parts of our process than others. And then I'm going to jump back into Blade Runner for the final third of this presentation, just to kind of explain how that rolled out across the project. So the brief was really formed between Andrew Popplestone, our creative director, Paul Inglis, the supervising art director. and the other kind of senior creative team. And it was the first thing that struck me about the brief, this notion of between the original film and the one that we were about to embark on, there'd been a reset in technology. There'd been a global event that had meant that all electronic hard drives had been wiped, everything had been reset, and we were going to use technology as a statement on the divide in society. So anyone below mega powerful and privileged would just be scrapping together technology, just figuring out a way of making it work for their purposes. It would come from a more organic optical place. It would feel way more used, less up to date, with its imperfections. People were working around it. And then at the upper echelon, we're really thinking about just absolute modernity, absolute perfection, some sort of bespoke hybrid system that is built for those very powerful people. And we always start from a script, which is a great, and it is a privilege really, because it's quite liberating just to be working off of words. You get the chance, the opportunity to imagine what if, and it's really that blue sky thinking that we travel through with the director and the creative teams that allows us to come up with something new and less iterative. So we're digging through the words in the script. Now the funny thing about Blade Runner is so secretive that we flew over to Hungary, where the film was being shot, locked away in an art department room with a camera on us, and we got 20 minutes to read the entire thing, and that was it. So a little bit pressured, and we weren't allowed to take notes, so it was all from memory. But I think in some ways that meant that we didn't get caught too much up on the detail, and it was more about the general impact of the movie emotionally on us, and that's what we were responding to. And then you walk out into the art department, and it's a room probably half the size of this, floor to ceiling, with just incredible artwork, just absolutely stunning world-building, concept art. And you're letting that influence you. It's all kind of soaking into your brain, and it's just working around. And then slowly but surely, as we get to work on the project, we add to that wall, and it starts influencing the other departments. That's really important to us. It's a very collaborative experience when it comes to working on a film, because you're just working with such great people, some people in costume, people in the art department, set building, if there's animatronics or visual effects, it's just a cross-pollination of ideas until you all kind of find the right solutions, and it all feels consistent in terms of that world building. So we have this real issue, especially in sci-fi, that it comes with its stereotypes, and we, especially in this film, Denis wanted us to really question our creative process. He wanted us to step away from the computer. If we're creating technology that's come from a different place, then potentially our tools could take us down a route that has been trodden before. So we completely stepped away from the computer. We started projecting things. We started photographing things. We had a rather unpleasant fridge contents for quite some time as we were doing macro photography. We did a lot of macro photography of fruit. We wanted to find ways of looking at this biotech, looking at brain scans, looking at all these sorts of ideas, and not letting a computer generate it, but finding other processes that are maybe a little bit more familiar to 20 years ago, where you're kind of hand-etching graphics and all those sorts of ideas, and letting that really inform the final result. One of the great things about working with people like the costume department and the art department is their talent and their skill set. There's a real legacy and history to those trades. And they've really developed a language and a process for coming to a project fresh each time. One of the key aspects is research. Thinking about the texture of the material, the weighting of it, how is that going to inhibit the actor's performance? What's the history behind that particular thread and that particular weave? What does it say about that person in society? So there's a grander context that you're kind of weaving into. As a motion graphics design studio, we felt as though we were lacking some of that somewhat, and we wanted to bring that back into our work at a very early stage in territory setting up. So on films like The Martian, we got to speak to NASA, and we really listened. We would have weekly conversations with them, understanding all the data, understanding all the tech, understanding their own roles in that environment, and how that tech influences the way that they work, then we can start to really look at that data and think about how we represent it for a film like The Martian and how it might tell a story. And it's about telling a story in a 3-second beat. You know, your work might only be seen in one shot, and it really needs to count. You have to be efficient with that design and that storytelling. So it has to hold up to that test. So when you see a shot like that for 3 seconds, you get it. But if you wanted to really dive in, or if it was seen across a number of shots, there would be enough detail and information there for it to have those layers of meaning. So for us, in this particular shot, that was all live. They were big LED screens. That was a server-controlled series of designs down in the bunker area there. And we really took the time to understand the data and help the storytelling with the director and really just create a design language so that it could shoot really well. So we don't deal with green screen. Whenever we can, we will do the graphics live. And that's really important to us. It's really important to the director and the cinematographer because they're not imagining what if. They can show the actors for real. The actors can look at the right things. They can perform against it. So it's to the benefit of everyone, really. So this is an iPhone shot. I probably shouldn't have taken this, so please don't tweet. And this is on another set. This is not Blade Runner. But it just gives you a sense of the sort of environment that you're walking into as a director and an actor and what that does to aid the performance. It just makes more sense to me. So back to Blade Runner. So this is the type of concept art that we're looking at. We're trying to understand where the art department has taken the environment. And they were very loose and impressionistic with it, but there's just this dirt, this lived-in feel, this history that we don't totally understand, and we had to let that feed into the graphics. So this is Josh's office. It was an early concept. And you're seeing this power struggle happening here, and we're starting to read through the script and really think about what story points are going to be delivered on this screen. And then we get these great little, kind of animations that help us get a sense of volume and space and lighting so that we can then design our graphics into that. It's not done in a bubble and then kind of passed over to a studio set in Hungary. We're very close to it. And there were some real moments of, visual complexity. There was a set of scenes where you're out into the streets. It feels very connected to the original film. Lots of LED displays and kind of multicultural design languages going throughout that allow this kind of, multiplicity going on that was very important to the director. And we built all of that out for real. There's hundreds and hundreds of graphics down this film set that was built, and then they ran rain into it and had all the extras. So we're just constantly letting all of this concept art influence our design work. So these were very early mood boards. Once we'd gone through the first initial conversations with Denis and Paul, we started hitting on this idea of microfiche and optical displays and graphics that didn't feel perfect and unhuman, but actually very human, very tangible, very real, very organic, very analog. That was the emotional connect that we wanted the technology to have with the audience at times, and then at other times a complete distancing. We started looking at things like bioluminescence, just thinking about how can a display not look illuminated as you're seeing now. It's a beautiful illuminated display, but something that is lit or displayed in a different way. So things like the Amazon Kindle or like a microfiche or just a piece of acetate when you were using Letraset. Those kind of just something that has tangibility to it, that has a physicality to it that people can connect with. And that has this notion of not illuminated. So this is me putting out on screen really some of our failures, some of the wrong ways that we went, some of the conversations that weren't working for the director. This one, as beautiful as it was, and I would have been very pleased to have seen this up on screen. Just felt a little bit too sci-fi for the director. You know, the whole notion of this being film noir, we had to be careful on that. Again, this was going a little bit too Marvel, a bit too techie. The color palette wasn't quite right. It was probably too vivid, actually. So this was the scene where we're looking at brain scans. So it was those kind of missteps, wrong directions, that really pushed us to completely step away from the computer and start to question our process. And that's when we started photographing things and hand etching things and looking at visuals through a lens, and then maybe photographing that and projecting it again and photographing that, so that we let the analog process really bleed into the work, influence the output, even though there were digital parts to it. So that middle green image at the top, that was a melon sliced in half. Then we 3D scanned it. Then we printed that, projected it, and reshot it, just to get that kind of history to the image. And so you get things like this. That are, there's elements in there that are digital, but most of it's optical. Most of it's processed, reprocessed. And it was exciting. It was exploring what was possible. There was a real kind of 3 or 4 week development phase where we really just enjoyed the process, and the director was very supportive of that and was open to seeing the experiments that were coming out. So I think once we'd set that great framework and he understood that process, he completely bought into it and just let us run with it. So now we're kind of getting into the specifics of scenes. There's one scene where, has everyone seen the film? I just suddenly thought, there's spoilers in this, please go. If you he's a replicant. So it's machinery, it's very physical. The interface isn't a touch screen. There's mechanics to it. There's a interplay between human and machine. The director was really into that, really wanted that physicality to happen. And he's looking through a D&A database. But that D&A database is etched on glass. It's like going through an old microfiche in an old library. It's got a mechanical element to it. It's got glass and optics. You have a sense of where the light's coming from. And then when you discover this moment about the baby and where it's come from and that kind of key exposition, it meant a lot to us that the director had chosen moments to deliver real story points that were using graphics. So all of this kind of, analog meets digital was playing the whole way through. So this is back to Josh's office and the sorts of things that she's looking at there. And it's, if you're a UX designer here, I'm sorry. It's breaking all the rules. Our motivation is not to create a system that is maybe 100 years in the future from where we are now. This really is using the tech, using the displays to tell a story, to have some sort of emotional resonance within this world building that we're looking at. It has that, it answers that brief, but it doesn't answer the classic UX tech brief that we're used to using in the real world. What's fascinating for me is, answering the question around how you bring emotional and humanity and these kind of personal touches into technology is quite an interesting question to ask. As our tech becomes quite modern and simple and very similar to one another. Again, data visualization, we were using a lot of this to tell stories in certain ways, and they're glimpses again. This shot may have got 3 or 4 seconds. It's the moment before she gets killed. It's quite a key moment. But there are details in here for people that are really interested in kind of getting into the depths of the world building. And some of them for us stay as Easter eggs for some time, and then 3 or 4 years down the road, suddenly gets released on the blog and someone's just seen those extra little Easter eggs that we've left in there. So these were early concepts for the facial scan once she's been killed. This was before the iPhone had a face recognition, I might add. Would it look cooler if they'd done it this way? And then, the final shot is not too dissimilar to our concept. It was weird, actually. This concept didn't go through too many rounds of iteration. I think once we'd had this shorthand language with the director and the art department, we were getting getting results a lot quicker. It was less iteration. We do subscribe at Territory to the idea of failing fast and getting through bad ideas quickly. This wasn't one of those. This got there very, very quickly. There was something that just felt right within that universe. And I mean, technology, the moment, talking about brutality, talking about the power play that's going on within society, all of these ideas coming together through these moments. So I love this scene because it really reminded me of the original movie where he's zooming and scanning through that photograph and he discovers the character reflected in the mirror. So there was really this need for this point in the film to show the technical excellence of our hero, and so he's looking at this pelvis bone and he's scanning through, and it's really only him that can find that moment, find that barcode to deliver that new story beat. So we had these early concepts. We totally knew where this was going, but it was, so how do we display this process? How do we display this content and not make it fully CGI? So we started again getting back into the photographs. These colorways were completely wrong. The director just felt it was too punchy. So much of this needed to feel monochrome. Let's strip out the warmth. Let's strip out the humanity. Let's give it some contrast. Let's make it feel brutal. So we were immediately off point with these tests. And these were lens tests. These were us shooting through at textures and just playing with light, playing with texture, playing with form. So we weren't getting the control that we wanted, so we started going down the CGI route. Again, it's just not there. So in the end, we ended up, creating a hybrid of those ideas. So it was CGI, then it was a pelvis bone that was then scanned, that was then created as a CGI, that was then projected, that was then photographed. And that's what got us to this point. And it has such a strong connection to the actual material. And it was really important for us to go through that process. And the reason I think we were able to go through that process on this film more than others was because there wasn't too many things for us to create. Every moment that was chosen to involve us was for a particular reason, was very considered. So we weren't stretched in terms of our scope. We could really put a decent amount of R&D and concept and exploration into each individual moment. Really consider the story, really consider the world building, the characters, what the technology is saying at this point, and have some fun with it and explore and try and find executions that don't feel iterative and that do feel relevant to the original Blade Runner, but are designed for the now. Oh, there you go. The spinner, I mean, that's just so cool. Great shape language, there was so much design work going on around this. Incredible art teams working up the visuals. And really, at early days, we were just understanding the shape language that's going on in there, just tuning into that, really understanding the forms that are being created and how something might be displayed in a screen, in a series of screens in the interior. And there were hundreds of drawings. I think the art department were probably fighting over this one. And just beautiful, beautiful work that feels connected to the legacy, but just has its own breath in this time. So we were following them on that journey. But we touched on the spinner quite late in the project. We kind of wanted to give ourselves some distance and just see how that turned out. And then we started getting, closer and closer, understanding its place in the environment, how it's going to move around, its purpose in the film. And then we started in kind of working the designs in. And again, the team did a great job. They saw that this was the moment when we wanted the warmth to come in, that moment of contrast. We wanted the replicant in all of this to be the most human, the most connected to the audience. So we used the technology and the colorways and the organic humanity of that tech to come through, which ended up giving us, screens like this as the moments of warmth that were really important to the director. And it's really important to consider the designs as a set, as an operating system. You just can't work on this stuff in isolation. So what we tend to do is our designers will work per set, so we'll have one motion designer per set, so we get that level of consistency throughout, if we have the bandwidth to do that. And it works really, really well. To then contrast against the corporate structure, the mega corporate structure, this kind of brutal force that's just suppressing pretty much the rest of the population. And we wanted this tech to feel modern and bespoke, and maybe a projection of where we are today. But it was made for someone that only they could read it. Only Wallace Corp had this sense of how to work with this tech.
I want to ask you some questions.
Checking in on an old serial number.
That's gonna be tough.
So that's it, really. It's just, as you can imagine, it was just the most incredible project to work on. It allowed us some blue sky thinking time. It was, it really was a question of where is technology, where is society heading, what in projecting into the future, what does that allow us to say about the now? It was incredible collaboration with that creative team. I would say they didn't feel like clients, they were almost educators in some way. We were really taking so much from that process. Looking forward to more like that in the future. Thank you.